Chapter 20.
In that place of violent, chaotic energy, in a moment suspended in time, the shining hand descended on Jack, and his world had exploded in pain. He was a million Jacks, and none. He was pulled a million ways down, a million branching paths of causality, but guided firmly down one. Monday, the 10th of October 2016, 12:03 a.m. 2 hours relative after Jack traveled to 2010. Jack reassembled from nothing and crashed steaming, wet, and gasping onto the ramp of Will's machine. His handgun reconstituted himself from nothing and hit the ramp with a clang. He opened his mouth and drew breath as it was for the first time. The room spun and veered. He was in the swimming hall. It was night. No light through the grimy upper windows. The lights that still worked were on. The tang of cordite lingered in the air, still fresh from the gunfight with Gibson and Chronon 1. It was a couple of hours after they had gone through Will's machine back to July 4th, 2010. The ghosts of 1,000 lives faded from his mind, coalescing into one. This one. The life where Beth was dead.
A sound came from his throat, from his chest, long and broken. He heard voices, sirens. He heard fear and panic. He understood that what he was hearing was the news. He rolled onto his back, angled his head, saw 2 pairs of legs at the end of the ramp, high tops angled up. Riverport NewsHour was exclaiming from its monitor, lots of reds and blues and the occasional reporter snapping off bullet points, while clearly wondering if the job was worth what they were going through. Jack's eyes traveled up the legs.
"Mother of crap," Nick said softly.
"You came out of nowhere!" Beth was dead. The world outside was going mad, and he felt nothing for it. Beth was dead. Sophie Amaral was seated in the wheeled office chair before the workbench, still alive. His entire body felt like a single deep bruise. Nick tried to help Jack up, was batted away. Getting up hurt Jack like breaking bones. He needed it. It felt like something. "Leave me alone." Sophia wasn't looking well. Her coat was draped over her shoulders, her right arm bandaged with what Jack now recognized as Nick's shredded shirt. Nick was bare-chested beneath the Raptors jacket. "She wouldn't leave," Nick said. "Said you might need her." "I can speak for myself," she said, her voice faint like wind over sand. Sophia's olive skin had gone flat, damp, and pale. When her voice spoke, it was thin, tired. "Tell me how you did that. How you reconstituted from nothing." She was more focused than her appearance suggested. "Something grabbed me." "Describe it," Jack did. "A shifter. The shifter. If it held a light in his hand the way you describe, that particular creature had been stalking Paul Serene for years. It features prominently in his nightmares, of which he has many. I've never seen him do anything but kill people. And I've never seen one tunnel a human being through time. Yet here you are." Ever the scientist, she asked. "What was it like? The journey?" "I remembering lives I've never lived. As Jack Joyce," Jack nodded. "I'd forget one as I remembered another. It felt like that happened 1,000 times, more." He shook his head. "I can't remember. Alternate versions of you, living alternate lives in alternate timelines. The creature pushed me away from every other path, right back here. The shifter mimicked the process that takes place within Promenade, and did so perfectly, but completely unassisted. The odds of you winding up in this place, at this moment, in this timeline, are so incalculably small that it's basically impossible. It wanted me here. That would be the logical conclusion, but the question is why? If we accept that these creatures are capable of rationality, forethought, and strategy, I mean, this one always seemed pretty measured. The one shifter Monarch possessed spent its days trying to kill us. It was rarely calm unless it left utterly alone within a stutter of substantial size. I never saw anything that suggested intelligence. I knew the man that creature used to be, Dr. Kim. Prized his mind above all. If he couldn't hold on to even a scrap of who he was, I don't imagine anyone could. Jack crouched, retrieved his handgun from the ramp, motioned to Sophia's injury. No hospital is a stupid idea, Doctor. She gestured to the screen. In a couple of minutes, Jack learned that a container ship had severed one of Riverport's two major bridges. Half the city had lost power. Communications outages were being reported across the state. Traffic accidents had reached pandemic levels and then ceased entirely. Several buildings were on fire. At least one helicopter had crashed into a church. Casualties were being estimated in the thousands. The airport and bus terminals were choked. Half the cops had walked off the job, and such the mayor had, within minutes, invoked martial law and outsourced peacekeepers to Monarch. Nick sighed. So we've been saying it's too dangerous to move. I've been saying she's in a world of trouble if we don't. This has been a night for miracles. Perhaps I'll get one of my own. She nodded toward the machine, or more specifically the space from which Jack had appeared. So here you are. Did you find the countermeasure? Jack shook his head. Monarch was there. Her face sank. And Beth? Jack didn't answer. Nick felt behind himself. Found a chair, sat. Didn't say anything either. Sophia suddenly looked 10 years older. And there's nothing to stop Monarch. Jack shook his head. Monarch stole the countermeasure. They still have it. Built Project Lifeboat around it. Sophia sat forward. I was told Dr. Kim created the regulator. It was his great legacy. You're saying the regulator is the countermeasure? My brother built it. In a workshop that's now what you people think of as Ground Zero. The casing cracked. Paul got a strong dose, and Beth... Sophia slumped backwards. I'm such a fool! That's why Kim was never able to properly harness. He never understood what... Oh my... I'm such a fool. It was all Dr. Joyce's work? All of it? Sophia, Jack said. Where do they keep the countermeasure? She fixed her eyes on him, anger sweeping away infirmantly. Floor 49. There's a security door in Paul's office. I'll draw you a map.
The Riverport swimming hall sheltered beneath the overpass. Rain slashed crazy, blasting down out the night sky couldn't make up its mind. The world outside had chopped up madness of lenses, myriad stutters popping up, lingering and vanishing at points across the city. The elevated line above began to sing. A train was incoming, not far away now. Monarch Tower was his destination, that train his ride. Nick had gotten him a backpack from the cab. Riverport Raptors. Jack slung it, tightened it. The stairs to the elevated platform were a block away. Jack warped. The platform was dark, every lightning tube blown out. Jack was the only living thing stupid enough to be there. The freezing, wind-lashed platform offered a 180-degree panorama of the world tearing itself to pieces. The bridge across the Mystic River was a smashed wreck, having risen too slowly to avoid a cargo ship stuttering right through it. The boat itself was a smoking, flaming ruin. Idle in the river, thrashing upon itself as multiple stutters threw its motions out of sync with itself. Alien-colored lightning leaped from earth to sky. Clouds roiling like an off-black special effect. Entire sections of the city had blacked out. The soundtrack to all of this was alarms, sirens, horns. The platform's loudspeaker system was still running, piping Riverport radio, the nighttime DJ rattling off disaster updates and urging people to stay in their homes. That's not going to help anyone, Jack thought. Nowhere is safe. Once the rules go out the window, the only solution now is wills. Jack had to find the countermeasure and somehow use it to fix all this, to make things right. The train was barreling its way toward the platform. Maybe it was automated, or maybe the driver couldn't see the blackened out platform, or maybe they were just flooring it in the hope of just getting clear of getting out. Whatever the reason, the train wasn't slowing. He ran down the platform,
climbed to the top of the rigid iron safety fence that protected commuters from a straight drop to the overpass below, grabbed the gutter of the shelter, and bounced himself onto the pebbled roof. Jack took 3 steps back from the edge, angled himself to the metro train's approach as best as he could, waited. The train was 3 blocks away. Waited. 2 blocks, moving fast. Waited. 1 block, and warped. In less than a second, he sprinted forward, covering the gap between the roof and the platform and the top of the train, and kept running forward, covering enough space within the folded second to match the train's speed. As quickly as he could, he decelerated. Before that second expanded, got low, dug in, and held on tight to the lip of the carriage that was atop. The second unfolded, and tossed Jack face first into a hurricane, his fingers almost snapping off at the joints of the train's speed outmatched by orders of magnitude. He had to get the fuck off that train car. He pulled himself forward, slid down into the gap between the cars, and shouldered through the door, gasping. His arrival was met with wide eyes and a few alarmed screams. Passengers. Of course there were passengers. A handful in this car, and he could see others in the car down the line. He felt that now familiar pulse in his blood that said a stutter was coming. This was the third to last car. Glancing behind him, it looked like the others had been blacked out for the night. No other passengers. Small mercies. An old man sat with a young woman. His eyes were fixed with a sad concern on the world outside, while his pale paw of a hand patted hers. A young guy in a suit was stabbing furiously at his phone while a middle-aged woman glanced at him with contempt. A broad-shouldered father in a flannel overshirt held his small son tightly to his chest, glancing frantically from one window to another. Another pulse kicked through Jack, harder this time. Stutter incoming harder and faster than any had ever felt before. Jack held onto a chrome support as the train's frame jostled and kicked. "What's the deal with the driver? Where's this train headed?" The woman with the old man said, "Whoever's driving isn't answering the emergency intercom." "Worcester," shouted the man with the child. "All stops Riverport then express to Worcester. You from the company?" "No," Jack said. "No, I'm not from the company." He let go of the support, leaned across the seat, and opened the window. Sticking his hat out of the wind and rain, he saw Monarch Tower slide around the bend, just a few miles away. He planned on getting off that nearest platform, but if the train wasn't stopping, then the train wasn't stopping. The elevated line curved away to the east, shooting above what would have been busy nighttime streets. Jack saw very few people out there, a lot of trash vehicles, and windows lit from deep within by flame. He could see the domed distortions of stutters dotting the landscape like pimples. As one popped, another emerged. Conflict emerged wherever these new borders sprang up. 1 mile from Monarch Tower, the elevated line curved to the east. A big rig was making time, horn blasting, looking like it took directly beneath the elevated line. As it got close to stutter, snapped down, trapping the front of the cab, bringing it to a halt in a microsecond. The articulated trailer attached to it did not. The trailer rear-ended the back of the cab, flipped forward like a giant blade, and became trapped in the stutter. When it broke, the entire vehicle would smash into elevated line, and that stutter didn't look like it'd be around for long, flickering as it was. Jack pulled his head and shouted, "Last car! Everyone into the last car!" Nobody moved. Half a mile. Jack pulled his pistol, fired a shot into the ceiling. People screamed and ran. Jack moved forward fast. "Move! Everyone! Last car!" The crowd surged into the back, the old man struggling to get out of his seat. "I'm sorry about this," Jack said, "but we have to move." The woman didn't question. Together as they got the old man upright, looping one arm each around his shoulders, moving as fast as they could. The few people in the second car were in the program, and almost nobody was in the third. "Bunch up tight against the back wall. Tight as you can." The old guy was doing okay. "Can you get down there?" The woman nodded. Jack removed the man's arm from around his shoulder to catch a glimpse out the window. The stutter holding the truck in place broke, the trailer descending on the elevated line like a knife. Whatever it contained was big, heavy, and there was a lot of it. The rig went up in a fireball. Jack whipped his head away, turned, and warped toward the terrified huddle of 20-odd people in the back of the last car. Squeezing in close and tight, he said, "I'm real sorry about this," and he threw down a stutter shield. The stutter shield anchored their tiny island of car and track in a bubble of frozen time, locked the rest of the car as they were squeezed into solidly in place. The rest of the train was not so constrained. They watched as the rest of the car deformed at 70 miles per hour, metal screaming, glass shattering, lights sparking and going dark as electrics were severed. The engine and every other car pulled away from the one violently, the line of cars straining and snapping their connections, fishtailing wildly. Then half their car tore off completely. Jack watched as the passenger train whipped all around horizontally, bowl-like once. The engine seemed to remain stationary in place as the car tail whipped around it. And then the centrifugal forces swung the engine around to smash like a mace through the front face of Monarch Tower. The engine cleaved through the bottom 2 floors of the building, tearing open the black mirror to reveal the honeycomb of its innards. The tail followed up, slashing through and around the building like a whip. Last stop, I guess. Jack Stutter had ankled the final car, the momentum now dispelled. He put his gun away. Monday, 10th of October 2016, 12:28 a.m., 28 minutes after Jack's return. Jack had walked the passengers down the elevated line to the platform across from Monarch Tower. He left them there, with advice to stay put, as it seemed to be one of the few places that wasn't being pummeled by violently vacillating causality. The thick black cloud cover roiled and unroiled and re-roiled. The violent lightning froze, re-round, re-flashed. The passengers watched as the train whipped back up from the wound in the tower, reassembled mid-flight and seamlessly reattached to the car from which they had just escaped. Then it let go once more, tearing itself apart and brutally lacerating the tower's face. Freezing, backstepping, letting go. Superstructure slowing down the tower's chest, drooling shattered black glass. Sometimes the tower front shattered without the train impacting at all. Sometimes the truck rewound and was delayed, yet the train flew free anyway. It was more than just the world that was falling apart. It was the rules that bound the world together, the principles that gave meaning to the flow of time. Causality was becoming porous and weak, falling apart like a wet cake. Jack took the stairs down from the platform at a run, reached the street, timed his crossing, and warped towards Monarch Tower before the truck could tumble past again. The train completed its arc, smashing through the building and destroying the security doors and most of the facade. The woman and her grandfather stood in the lip of the platform and waved to him. Jack almost waved back when he stepped back from the edge, paused, stepped forward again, waved, paused, stepped back. Science was even less than his thing than Beth's, but Jack guessed that if they were standing next to them, his subjective causality as it pertained to them would be fine. But at a distance, his causality disagreed with theirs. In short, stutters were no longer separate and distinct things. The breakdown was becoming far more granular, finicky, dangerous. If it kept degrading at this rate, the universe's chronon levels would flatline and there'd be no coming back. He had to stop that from happening. He ran for the shattered entrance. The engine had separated from the line of cars, frozen in the act of wrapping themselves through the doors. The engine had separated from the line of cars, frozen in the act of wrapping themselves through floors 3 to 5. The engine had paused halfway through the act of smashing through Monarch's lobby, the vast open space that it used to showcase the successes of its various subsidiaries. The lobby was a museum to corporate achievement, a glossy space illuminated tastefully to better draw the eye to the contents of cases and displays. Or rather, had been tastefully before a 95-ton passenger locomotive had scythed diagonally through it all. The air was filled with concrete, dust, glass shards, and flying shrapnel. Jack ducked under the frozen train and out to the other side, pulling his handgun. The way out of the lobby and into Monarch's atrium had been shuttered by 2-inch-thick steel security doors, bomb-proof. Jack looked at the train, looked at the doors, looked at the train. Against his better judgment, he reached out and laid his palm flat against the overturned side of the vehicle. He remembered how it had worked under the quantum physics dome, reanimating Will. He'd done it again, pulling Sophia into the hijacked chopper 50 floors above Riverport. He imagined everything in black and white, while from his hands flowed Technicolor. With alarming suddenness, Jack felt his blood surge, his hand tingled sharply, and the locomotive trembled. The security doors hissed apart heavily. 2 Monarch goons strapped with the white half-shells of prototype power armor stood framed in the doorway. Autocannons slung over the arms sat readily. Targeting lasers probed from shoulder-mounted micromissile pods. They spotted Jack. Jack held up his free hand, smiled, and gave a little wave. The train launched right into them. Jack climbed over the wreckage of the locomotive, shaky from the exertion of freeing the train from the stutter. He climbed through the shattered wall, avoiding fritzing electrics, and past the tangled, half-buried remains of the security scanner that beeped forlornly in the haze. The train had tumbled, true through the security station and clear into the atrium, the space that had just a short while ago played host to Monarch's Night of Nights. Nobody had bothered to clean up. Raised stages, lighting rigs, bunting, video boards, smashed glassware, programs that were covered in concrete dust. Jack climbed out of the trench plowed by the train. Overhead, the atrium's clear ceiling let in all the mad light of a universe sundered by torsion. Dust, papers, and debris fell from 40 different mezzanines, none of the wreckage conforming to gravity with any sense of unison or regularity. The acoustics carried the sporadic bark of gunfire, the occasional lonely shout or scream from the street. He saw the sporadic otherworldly flicker of shifters prowling and vanishing along the mezzanines. Floor 34 vomited a gout of flame, a Monarch trooper falling, screaming to the atrium floor, stopping before impact, rewinding, pausing, falling, and screaming again. The man's high-pitched scream slurred into a drawn-out howl as he pinwheeled upward toward the tongue of boiling flame that was quickly retracting into one of the upper levels. He merged with the flame in time to be drawn out of sight by it, the concrete balustrade over which he had flown piercing nearly back together behind it. The elevator bays were transparent geometric tubes, all shattered behind the circular reception area. Two contained the wrecks of elevators. The third was rendered opaque by smoke and burning debris. Jack wasn't alone there. He shared the ruined space with kinetic statuary that had once been living people. Moving, jigging, and backstepping all about him were dead people, continually reenacting their final moments of life. All of them violent, all of them screaming as hideously as the man forever tumbling from the 34th mezzanine. Jack felt weak, detached. Unleashing the train had taken it out of him. He was going to need a few minutes to regenerate his charge. It seemed to be taking longer now that the world's chronon levels were a thin, spasmodic mess. He made for the reception desk, hoping to find a stairwell door, moving and turning to avoid flailing arms, airborne droplets of blood, flying glass, flying bullets. It wasn't just Monarch troopers meeting their end there, but the workers needed to keep a place functioning. People who turned up to earn a paycheck. The elevators weren't an option. They weren't rewinding far enough back to be usable. Howls. A whole fucked up choir. Shifters, up there, prowling the mezzanines. Jack figured he had no choice but to take the stairwell. But he didn't like his chances if he were caught in the narrow space with one of those things. He moved to the reception desk, hoping to find a floor plan. One of the creatures was waiting on the other side of it, maybe 50 feet away, writhing, flashing. It yowled softly, curiously. Its contorted body language, the cant of its flickering, flashing head, and what sort of something wanting something it was not allowed to have. Another stood to the left, by the wrecked train. 3 more were off to the far right, hovering in the shadows. They saw him, screamed, flashed forward, close, flashed again, closer. 2 more blinked in, flanking the shifter 50 feet from Jack, roared. A third blinking in behind them, spread its arms, and the 3 shifters flashed aside. He recognized this one. It threw its head to the sky and loosed the sound of 100 horses with slashed throats. Shining Palm. "Hey," Jack said very carefully. "You brought me here." Every single shifter lost its shit completely. The 3 to the right charged, flashing in and around the frozen, jigging corpses on a killing path straight for him. Shining Palm wheeled on them, shrieked. The 3 braked, rounded on him, and screamed right back. Jack took his chance and ran. He sprinted right, then warped past the reception area, giving the 3 clustered shifters a wide berth. The exertion took it out of him, dropping him almost back to 0. The 3 reacted, spun,
Shining Palm leaped, slamming into their cluster, sending them scattering. Jack pivoted, facing them. Shining Palm retargeted. "Hey now," Jack said reasonably. "Back off!" It charged. Jack leaped boots first into the bent knee of an inanimate Monarch trooper who was arched backward in death, and jumped up, clawing for the falling trooper as it hurtled at half speed to the atrium floor. "Time to be lucky," he gasped. "Please be lucky." Jack's fingers scrambled against cloth that was utterly immovable, managed to loop one arm around the man's midsection and back of its flailing legs, punching Jack in the face. Froze. Jack almost came loose with the jarring stop. Shining Palm swept both killing paws upward as the trooper rewound, at speed. For Jack, the next 10 seconds were a lot like falling off a cliff while being punched in the face. When the flailing trooper hit his parabola, Jack's grip slipped and continued upward briefly while the trooper redocked with his past. Jack missed the 34th floor entirely while sailing toward a slow approaching 35th. He grabbed for the glass and steel balustrade as if it were all he ever wanted. Got his forearms across, fell, bashing chest against the flat of it and his chin against the rail. Stars, flailing, didn't let go. Felt nothing beneath his feet. A terrible and total nothing. He let himself hang for just a moment, gasping, slipping his boots onto 35 and rolled himself over the rail. His back hit the ground hard. Just breathed as if he'd forgotten how to. "Kill him!" Ah, shit. He slapped both hands against the slate gray carpet, popped his shield, almost black out from the effort. Heard a ton of bullets thwip against the carapace. He was done, running on fumes. "Fuck off," Jack said to the ceiling flatly. "Whoever you are, just fuck off." "That shield has a half-life about what? 10 seconds? 15? Jack heard the snick-snack of weapons reloading. The subtle pneumatic hiss of a German-engineered microhydraulics. The question mark whine of servos. He sat up beneath his bubble. "That's Jack Joyce," someone else said. There were 30 guys and 2 juggernauts, all of them rigged for their stutter mobility. They'd been hauling ass and braked to a halt when Jack flipped over the railing. The ones bringing up the rear were swinging assault rifles back and forth like they were expecting to get jumped any second. "Who gives a shit?" another said. "We're almost there." The leader, a clean-cut kid with a movie star complexion, shook his head. Shifters can't pass through the stutter shield. But he can. We can't leave him wandering around." The kid opened up, barking a 30-round mag into the shield, wide coverage. Hundreds of bullets waited for permission to splash Jack to paste, while the squad kept him cover with everything they had. "Figure that half-life is down to about 5, the kid said. If Jack stepped outside, he was going to die. If he stayed put, he was going to die. He didn't have enough left in him for a warp. 4, the kid said. Jack looked left and right. He was on a curved mezzanine with the Monarch crew in front of him. There was cover behind the elevator bay to the right. To the left, there was all glass-walled meeting rooms along the full line of the gallery. Not enough charging him to cover a warp of 10 feet. The shield trembled. So did the bullets. 3! Jack glanced behind him. Over the side, he mumbled to himself, thinking back to Paul's panicked face at Bannerman's Overlook 6 years ago. Legs first. The kid smiled. His buddies braced weapons. Jack backed against the rail. Got a firm grip. The stutter watered down fast. Jack tensed. 1! The top half of the kid tore free and flew a messy 20 feet forward. Jack froze before freezing mid-air, trailing wet red machinery. Mad light. Howls. The stutter shield collapsed as Jack leaped to the right, instead of backward. The designer railing blasted the slag by the simultaneous impact of a cloud of military rounds and at least one micromissile. Something hot, slag, shrapnel or a bullet blazed through his hamstring. The entire squad had now forgotten him, going full auto on an opponents far more lethal than Jack. Rising to one knee, he came face to upside down face with the kid's shocked expression. He shuddered. Tough break. The squad had scattered like billiards. Shifters were tearing them to pieces. Back pressed to the elevator bay, chest pounding. Jack scanned the mezzanine for a way to Paul's office on 49. And found it. Security elevator. Black and chrome-edged. He fumbled in his pockets, trying to ignore the pain and keep the weight off his crumpled left leg, and found Sophia's security laminate. He glanced around the corner. A trooper flew past at waist height and hit the railing, where his spine snapped like a gunshot before flipping slackly into the void. One juggernaut wheeled in an awkward 45-degree three-step, targeting laser drawing a bead on one monster approaching its speed. The pilot spat his entire missile pod at the thing. A dozen micro-missiles vip whooshing in rapid succession down 70 feet of office hallway, clothing the thing in shrapnel and blooming flame clouds, to no effect. The shifter raised both arms, brought them down, and through the Juggernaut's only protection, the front armor plate. The man tried to wrestle free, had no chance. A second shifter zapped from behind, grabbed the guy around the face and waist, and pulled. The Juggernaut froze in a position of alarm. The trooper inside the suit froze mid-air. Pilot and frame violently disarticulated. A second Juggernaut pivoted to cut loose with its autocannon, pointlessly. 7.62mm rounds sprayed into the shifters. Wild rounds mowing down a handful of his workmates who were still alive. Realizing he was a drowning man strapped to a multi-million-dollar anchor, the pilot activated the emergency release, stepped backwards out of the exoskeleton, and ran straight toward the elevators. "No!" Jack hissed. "Not here! Not here!" A 7-foot-tall fractal silverback dropped out of the pilot, crushing him. Jack breathed a sigh of relief. The shifter snapped its head up, roared, and reached for him, palm filled with starlight. Oh, fuck. Jack warped. He didn't make it far, but he cleared the distance between the elevator bays and the glass-walled rooms, the nearest of which were now bullet-riddled and shattered. He came out of the warp and kept running, old school, his left leg bright red with pain. The security elevator was 100 feet away and closing, the sounds of carnage behind him dwindling as the shifters began to run out of people to butcher. A quick look behind, he saw Shining Palm take down one trooper before one long swipe reduced a second trooper to a dead statue. 70 feet. The pain in his leg was receding. It took weight more easily. Jack warped. 30 feet. He was dizzy, seeing stars. Glanced back. Shining Palm was thundering down the gallery after him, and behind him came a wave of other shifters. Jack warped 15 feet and almost blacked out. Laminate in hand, and he swiped it through the slot. Glanced back. Shining Palm was 50 feet and closing. 40. The security doors opened. Jack leaped inside, punched the door close button. As they slid closed, Jack noticed the chronon frame that backed the elevator, charged. 10 feet. Doors closed. Jack braced for impact. Nothing but howls. The elevator climbed upward, its own rescue rig keeping it mobile despite universal stasis. He collapsed against the wall, slid to the floor. He hadn't stopped to think the elevator might be uncooperative as everything else in the stutter. Looked like Paul took that into account when he rigged the top floors with his own stutter shield.
"Good morning, Dr. Amaral,"
the elevator said.
"You are not due at the office for another 6 hours and 18 minutes.
A stutter shield that Jack figured was powered by the countermeasure. The infoscreen told him it was 12:42 a.m. The doors opened on floor 49, and Jack felt chronon dampeners like a thug of a mild hangover. He had no advantages here if anyone tried to jump him. Jack emerged into a hallway lit by recessed violet strip lighting and walked toward Paul's office without so much as a limp. His leg is healed. Paul's door was fine mahogany sent to sci-fi housing. Sophia's card clicked in, got green-lighted, and the door's mag lock released with a pleasant thunk. Pistol gripped in both hands, Jack booted the door, sending it flying open hard enough to the handle to punch through the wall and keep it there. He stepped in briskly, scanning. He was alone. The glass wall on one side, staircase curving up to the living quarters on the other. Desk facing glass wall. Big, gnarled-looking, expensive wooden chair. Expensive art. Expensive carpets. 2 floor-tall bookshelves. Fully equipped gymnasium on the far side. Jack took Sophia's map, checked the layout. The regulator was kept in a sealed chamber directly beneath her chronon labs, and was accessible through... Behind the desk, flush with the wall, was an armored security door, reinforced 2 inches thick, and the eruption of technology next to it suggested that nobody was getting in without everything including a urine sample. And a suspiciously open door. The door was wide open. The chamber beyond it lit bloody red. Jack approached sidelong and slow, gun at the ready. Could be just popped open when the building started freaking out. Or maybe someone had panicked and left it like this. He glanced inside. Broad and deep, Paul's side of the regulator chamber ended in a thick transparent wall. That wall had a door, also open. And beyond that, the chamber was walled with diagnostics. 2 standing consoles faced the far wall, and set into the wall was a geometric depression. Within that depression sat the thing Jack and Beth had gone through hell to find. The countermeasure had been reinforced since Jack had last seen it. Back in 2010, when Beth had died, it was now gloved tightly within a reinforced titanium frame. Connectors and adapters had been built into it, conservatively for the purpose of powering Monarch Tower's chronon-related vitals. Otherwise, beneath the pretty new dress, it was still Will's homemade Dodeca gun. It was a powerful thing for such a small object. No bigger than a volleyball. He moved in. Nobody home. He stepped into the chamber proper. Everything quietly humming. Screens flashed blueprints of the entire tower. Looked like Will's volleyball really was powering everything that mattered. Jack got closer to it. Pulls out the clamps and catches deep into the place. Which panel governed the release mechanism? It was the panel with the screen opened on Regular Housing Release, Y/N. Jack closed his eyes, sighed. Alright, he said. Whatever you're going to do it. Nothing. Come on, door's open! Every safeguard on this thing's been disabled, do it! Nothing. Regulator Housing Release, Y/N. Jack stared at it, hating it. Fuck it. Catches popped like gunshots. Electromagnets powered off. Cabling popping free from every socket on the device. Klaxon blared deafeningly. Once, and the lighting in the room shifted to blue. Floor 49 stutter shield deactivated. Floor 50 stutter shield deactivated. Chronon dampeners offline. Elevator mobility rigs offline. Howls. Jack leaped toward the countermeasure, tugged it from its housing. A little resistance. The salvation of humanity. I have no idea how to use this thing. The shifters were moving in. Jack zipped the countermeasure into Nick's backpack, slung it, and ran out of there. There was only one person left who knew what to do. The chamber's southern exit led to Paul's office, and a western exit was designed for quick access to the time lab. Jack took the latter. The security door led to a dog-leg hallway. He rounded the second corner, swiped his way through the door, secured it behind himself. He stood in the glass box control room, looking down on the sterile expanse of the Monarch Time Laboratory. Safety areas marked out in black and yellow lines. A raised grill floored diagnostic station on the far side. The machine itself, that smooth, high-tech donut, sat heavy on the right side of the lab. The Time Core, the one Monarch had airlifted out of Riverport University 2 nights ago, hung 20 feet above the center of the ring, cabling draping down to the promenade, ready for automated lowering and connection. The Time Lab had its own starter proofing, a series of discrete generators in each corner of the room, drawing a chronon charge from the same batteries that powered the machine, insurance, and an escape route against the main shield ever going down in the midst of a crisis. Jack slapped the release button, setting the machinery down the stairs in motion. He exited the far side of the observation deck, clattering down the stairs as the Time Core lowered carefully into position at the center of the promenade. It was still inching downward as the shifters crashed through the corridors upstairs. Reaching the time lab floor, Jack looped thumbs through the straps of his pack, pulling it tight against his back to minimize bounce, and sprinted for the machine. He got to the controls just as various connectors began jacking into the core. The controls lit up. A swarm of crazed light manifested inside the glass box control room.
Shifters flickered and phased into the lab. Fuck! It wasn't possible to go back any earlier than when the machine was first activated, which was around 4:15 a.m. the previous Saturday. Today was Monday. He gambled on 4:35 a.m. and activated the machine. The Monarch machine was better made. The Promenade charged up immediately, the airlock levering itself open smoothly as the Horde rolled out of the observation deck, already appearing here and there across the time lab's expanse. Jack warped for the airlock, up the ramp, spun, and slapped the release plate. The airlock began levering itself closed as that galloping, tumbling mass of schizophrenic carnage filled the lab, skidded and barreled toward him, howling hatred. Jack stopped. Someone was in the lab, standing unbothered, eyes on Jack as the Horde flowed around him. Martin Hatch. The shifters didn't acknowledge Monarch CEO, didn't lay a claw on his finely tailored suit. Hatch watched the airlock close as the monsters flowed around him, galloping and tumbling for Jax, until he was lost from sight behind the strobing and shifting mass. The airlock smooched shut as the first creature slammed at the door. The right door opened and Jack stepped into safety. There was one person who could still make this work, and Jack had a plan to bring him back from the dead. Fuck the laws of the universe.